So, if you've ever walked away from a conversation with a covert narcissist feeling guilty, confused, or like you just lost an argument you didn't even know you were having, you're not crazy and you're definitely not alone. Passive aggression, it's not just a bad habit for them, it's a strategy. And today I'm breaking down exactly why they refuse to communicate directly and how that manipulation plays out throughout the relationship. Welcome to the Common Eco community. My name is Christina, and I'm a toxic relationship recovery coach. If you think you've had a relationship with a covert narcissist and want to see how your relationship stacks up to the typical phases of narcissistic abuse, I've got a free checklist for you that can help you do just that. You'll find the link for that in the description below. So now let's talk about why covert narcissists do not communicate directly. It's almost like they're incapable of it. But for the most part, they are very capable. They just choose not to. And one reason is because they want to maintain plausible deniability. And plausible deniability is something that we talk about quite a bit on this channel. You see, covert narcissists are experts at saying just enough to get their point across without fully committing to their words. So they may say something about your appearance, about something you just did, about your cooking, maybe. They don't fully commit to the insult, but you know exactly what they mean. So what they're doing is they're communicating through subtle digs, passive aggressive comments, and maybe ambiguous statements that leave so much room for interpretation. And their tactic, it serves a really important purpose for the narcissist. It allows them to deny everything if you challenge them. If you call them out on something hurtful, they'll immediately backpedal with, oh, I was just joking. You're too sensitive. Or something like, you're twisting my words. That wasn't my intention. And while, of course, that happens sometimes we do misinterpret things. But when we're dealing with a covert narcissist, this is consistent. This happens all the time, usually around the same subjects. And it happens consistently throughout the relationship, leaving you questioning yourself constantly. You see, by keeping their words vague and indirect, they know that they can provoke a reaction from you while pretending that they did nothing wrong. And this is how they manipulate situations without taking any responsibility. So, how does this mess with you when you're dealing with it consistently? So, when someone constantly speaks in riddles, you end up questioning your own reality, and especially your interpretation of reality. You wonder, maybe I misunderstood or I'm overreacting. And over time, this erodes your confidence and it makes you more susceptible to their control. You might even find yourself in a cycle that so many of us do, trying to prove that their words meant what you know they did. And this is just going down the rabbit hole and it leads nowhere. So maybe you replay conversations in your head, bringing up specific things that they've said, or asking for clarity. You imagine how you can have this conversation in a way where they would finally understand logic and understand what you mean by the words that you're clearly saying. But no matter how much evidence you provide, they twist the narrative to make it seem like the problem is you, not them. So now we know that doesn't work, and here's what you can do instead. The best way to counter this is by refusing to engage in their word games. So instead of trying to get them to admit what they meant, hold firm to your own perception. If something felt off, trust the feeling. You don't need their permission to recognize manipulation when you see it. So another reason that covert narcissists don't communicate directly is because direct communication feels like a loss of power. So for a covert narcissist, communication is definitely not about clarity. Like it should be, right? Communication should be about clarity. But for the covert narcissist, it's about control. You see, in a healthy relationship, people express their needs, their concerns, and their emotions openly because they trust the other person will listen and respect them. But for a covert narcissist, direct communication, it feels like giving up power. And that's something that they outright refuse to do. They always need to have the upper hand in conversations and especially in arguments. So here's why they avoid being direct. You see, for a covert narcissist, speaking openly requires a level of emotional vulnerability that they just can't handle. And if they say what they want, they risk hearing the word no, that we know is like kryptonite to a narcissist. So instead of being upfront, they keep their cards close to their chest and manipulate situations to get what they want without ever having to ask directly. So this is why they'll drop vague hints instead of asking outright. It's also why they'll give the silent treatment instead of saying they're upset, or why they'll make passive-aggressive remarks instead of having an honest conversation. So the more you chase them for clarity, the more control they have over the conversation. I know it feels sometimes like we're doing the opposite, like this is what we need to do to pin them down and to actually get them to say what they mean, but this is really just playing into the game. So when you're with somebody who's doing this consistently, what does it do to you? Well, because they refuse to communicate like a normal person, you're left constantly guessing what's wrong or trying to read between the lines. So you might ask, are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? And what is it that they want from me? And this confusion, it puts all the emotional strain on you while they just sit back and watch. Or worse, if you confront them by directly saying something like, if you have a problem, just say it, they'll act like you're making this up out of nowhere, like they don't have a problem. It's you who has a problem. And we know that it's not just narcissists who are passive aggressive in this way or any other way. Just because someone is passive aggressive, it does not mean that they're a narcissist. Lots of people are passive aggressive. But passive aggression is a covert narcissist's go-to move, and that's why we're talking about it here today. So how do we handle it when we're met with someone who's behaving this way? It's kind of simple, actually. Just refuse to play along. If they want to be vague, let them. And don't ask for clarification. Don't beg to know what's wrong. If they give you the silent treatment, don't try to get them to talk. If they hint at something without saying it outright, do not fill in the blanks for them. This can get you into a world of trouble. Instead, just keep holding firm. And here are a few things that you could say. If you have something to say, just say it directly. I'm not going to guess. Or if you need something from me, please be clear about what that is. Another thing you can say, I'm not going to engage if I feel like you're not being honest and forthcoming with me. And I know how hard this is for some of you. If your entire childhood was spent trying to figure out why someone was mad at you or disappointed in you, this all might be very triggering to you when you're in this situation with a covert narcissist. But if this applies to you, please remember, when you're easily triggered, you are easily manipulated and controlled. So the more you disengage from their control tactics, the less power they have over you. And the next reason covert narcissists refuse to communicate directly is they need to keep you guessing. Covert narcissists don't just prefer indirect communication, they rely on it. And why is that? Because it's keeping you confused and it's giving them control. The less certain you are about where you stand, the more power they have in the relationship. A covert narcissist's communication is designed to make you second guess yourself. And they do this in 5 ways. First, by sending mixed signals. So one day they act warm and interested, and the next they're cold and distant. You never quite know where you stand. Next, they're saying things that contradict their actions. Actually, almost always, they're saying things that contradict their actions. So they might claim that they care about you, but their behavior tells an entirely different story. They also create uncertainty by using vague or indirect language. So instead of saying, I'm upset because of what you did, they'll say something like, I just feel like no one understands me. And when they're giving compliments, they're giving backhanded compliments, a subtle way of keeping you unsure if they're praising you or putting you down. Imagine something like, oh, you're so brave for wearing that outfit. And narcissists also create uncertainty by making you feel like you're always one step away from messing everything up. They won't tell you outright what they expect, but they'll punish you when you don't meet their unspoken standards. So over time, this destroys your sense of stability in the relationship. You start walking on eggshells, constantly analyzing their words and actions, trying to figure out what they really mean. So now let's talk about why they do this. And their goal is simple: control through confusion. If you're always guessing, they hold the upper hand. They want you to feel unsure, unsure of yourself, unsure of them, unsure of the relationship. Because when you're in a constant state of uncertainty, you're easier to manipulate. And if you ever try to get clarity, as I know you probably have, they'll either dodge the conversation or make you feel like the problem. So let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced this firsthand. So they might say things like, "You're overanalyzing things." Or, "Why do you always have to make things so complicated?" Or maybe, "I don't even know why you're acting like this. Everything was fine," when it clearly wasn't. They want you questioning your own instincts because the more confused you are, the less likely you are to challenge them. So, how do you get away from all this uncertainty? Well, the real answer is if you're dealing with someone who just wants to manipulate you, the real answer is to distance yourself. But that's not always possible. So, if you have to stay in this relationship, even if it's temporarily, you'll need to take some measures to protect your sense of self. So, you'll need to train yourself to trust your own perception more than their words. So, if something feels off, believe yourself, even if they're trying to convince you otherwise. And here are 3 more tips to help those of you who cannot leave this relationship right away. So, first, stop trying to figure them out. If someone wants to be understood, they'll communicate clearly. If they don't, that is on them and not you. If you like puzzles, try the Wordle. Don't ask the covert narcissist for clarity more than once. If they refuse to give a straight answer, take that as your answer. No answer is an answer. And set a standard for communication. So let them know you only engage in direct, honest conversations, and if they can't meet that standard, don't waste your energy. A covert narcissist will never stop playing the game, but you don't have to play along. You can stop playing the game. The moment you stop engaging with these confusing tactics, they lose their grip on you. And so the next reason that a covert narcissist avoids clear communication like the plague is because they can more easily play the victim. So most covert narcissists are a mix of perpetual victim and undercover aggressor. But victimhood gives them a way to dodge responsibility, gain sympathy, and flip the script when they're called out. It's the perfect cover for their aggressive tactics. I mean, after all, they can't possibly be a bully when they're always the victim, right? And one of the best ways to set themselves up as the victim is refusing to communicate clearly. And here's how their passive aggressive behavior sets up the victim role. So instead of saying what they mean, they drop hints, they sulk, or they'll use guilt tripping comments like, "I guess I just don't matter. I do so much for everyone else, and I just feel like no one ever considers my feelings." Okay, that's a vague, open statement that could be about anyone in the world, but you're saying it to me. Why are you saying it to me? And why are you saying it to me right now? So at that point, according to the covert narcissist, it's up to you to put on your detective hat and figure it all out. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. You don't have to figure it out. If someone is not telling you what's wrong clearly and directly, you cannot solve any problem. You cannot change your behavior if you're doing something hurtful because you don't know what it is that's hurtful. And trying to figure it out will just send you spinning. Because really, when someone's trying to manipulate you in this way and you ask them to clarify, they'll just say something like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it," or, you know what, it's not a big deal. So when someone responds in that way, they're making it very clear that their purpose, their only purpose, was to make you feel bad or feel guilty about something. They don't actually want to address the problem if there even is one, because then maybe there would be a resolution and you wouldn't walk away feeling bad about yourself. So the answer to why they do this, it's pretty obvious. By avoiding direct communication, they never have to take responsibility for their own emotions, and they can play puppeteer and pull the strings on your emotions. And this gives them that sense of power and control that they so desperately crave. And then when things eventually blow up because they did not communicate clearly, you were there filling in the blanks. They can very easily point to what you did, the blanks that you filled in, and how wrong and how bad they were. But really, you felt like you were left with no other choice. But again, I'm here to tell you, you are left with another choice. That choice is to just stop, to opt out of the game. Don't try to figure it out. Because when they point to all the things that you did wrong at this point, they can sit back and play the victim. And all of this whole tactic, it allows them to make you the bad guy for not reading their mind. It allows them to create drama while pretending they hate drama. And then they can flip the script so that even when they cause the issue, they somehow end up as the wounded party. And suddenly the real issue, which is their behavior, is completely forgotten. And the conversation shifts to how they're the one who's been wronged. So listen, a lot of us have people in our lives who behave this way, and we can't always go no contact with them. So, how can we protect ourselves? So, in the moment when you realize this is all a game, it's consistent, you always end up feeling the same way, you always walk away feeling bad. In that moment, you realize what's going on. Stop playing. If they won't communicate, refuse to chase them for answers. Instead, shift the responsibility back onto them. You can say something like, I'm not going to guess what's wrong. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. If not, I'm moving on. And by holding firm, you remove their ability to manipulate you through those vague complaints and passive aggressive jabs. And without those things, they lose their favorite weapon. But another reason that a covert narcissist will not communicate directly is that they want to keep their hands clean. So covert narcissists will never admit this really, but they thrive on conflict. And here's the problem. They can only stir it up if they can stir it up without looking like the bad guy. So direct communication would mean taking responsibility for their words and their actions. And that's not something they're willing to do. Instead, they manipulate from the shadows. So rather than openly confronting someone or making their intentions clear, they rely on tactics that allow them to stay just removed enough from the situation. And here's how they do it. So they might use triangulation. So instead of addressing an issue with you directly, they'll complain to someone else and let the drama come back to you. And passive aggressive jabs, we've talked about a little bit here and there, but this is another way that they cause drama. They just drop those drama bombs and they keep their hands clean. So they'll say something cruel, but disguise it as a joke. So, they might say something like, relax, I was just kidding. There's always a back door where they can backpedal their way out. Another way that a covert narcissist will back their way out of drama that they've created is by playing dumb. So when they're confronted, they'll pretend that they had no idea that they did anything wrong. So they might say something like, oh, I didn't realize that would bother you. But when they're doing things that bother you consistently that you've talked about before, they should have realized, shouldn't they? So another passive aggressive tactic that the covert narcissist uses to create drama while keeping their hands clean is silent sabotage. So if they're upset, they won't argue with you directly necessarily, not always. Sometimes they'll just forget to do something important or subtly undermine your efforts behind the scenes. So this way, if someone gets upset, they're the unreasonable one, and the covert narcissist gets to sit back and act innocent. So why they do this all comes down to self-image. Covert narcissists don't want to be seen as the aggressor, but they also don't want to give up control. By keeping their communication indirect, they get the best of both worlds. They manipulate the situation while looking like the misunderstood victim. And if you try to hold them accountable, that's when they'll gaslight you. They'll say, oh, I never said that, or you're making things up. Really, if you've been in a relationship with a covert narcissist, you know this very well. They'll do anything to avoid taking responsibility for their own behavior. So if you are in this situation, or if you found yourself in this situation, really the key to dealing with this tactic is not letting them stay in the shadows. So if they're trying to stir the pot while keeping their hands clean, drag their behavior into the spotlight. Call out the indirectness. So again, you might say something like, if you have something to say it directly. Or what do you mean by that? Right? If they're making a very vague statement and you know what they mean and they know what they mean, but they're not saying it, ask them directly what they mean by it. And for the most part, especially if there are other people around, they're probably going to back down. If they refuse to communicate openly, and a covert narcissist does refuse to communicate openly, just let them do their thing. Don't engage. A covert narcissist needs to operate in the shadows, but they also need you to engage in order for their manipulation to be successful. And the more you refuse to play their game, the less power they have over you. And so, like I mentioned earlier, not everyone who uses every single one of these tactics is a covert narcissist. These are what we're talking about here are passive aggressive tactics that a lot of people use, a lot of people who are emotionally immature. You may have even found yourself using one or two of these things in specific conversations or maybe earlier in life. But the reason why we're talking about it in the context of covert narcissism is because these are definitely go-to moves for the covert narcissist. So if you feel like you need a little bit more clarity in sorting out exactly how to spot a covert narcissist, click the video that just popped up on the screen where I talk through 7 ways to spot a covert narcissist in conversation. And before you go, don't forget to like this video if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.